Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The Sunday dinners at my parents' house in Pasadena had a rhythm I knew by heart. Mom would overcook the roast. Dad would pour himself 2 glasses of wine before anyone else sat down. My brother-in-law Marcus would mention his sales numbers within the first 10 minutes. And my sister Sarah would find a way to make everything. The food, the conversation, the air itself, about the company she and Marcus had built together. I had attended these dinners for 11 years. I had learned somewhere around year 3 to eat quietly and say very little. That particular Sunday in October, I was sitting at the far end of the table, cutting my overdone roast into small pieces, listening to Sarah explain to our Aunt Connie why their tech startup, Meridian Solutions, was positioned to become the defining B2B software platform of the decade. Marcus nodded along, reaching for the bread. "We've had 3 consecutive quarters of 40% growth," he said. "The institutional backing alone puts us in a category most companies never reach." "That's remarkable," Aunt Connie said, because she always said that. I kept eating. It was my mother who accidentally opened the door. She looked down the table at me with the particular expression she reserved for topics she found slightly embarrassing, like my apartment, my car, or my career, and said, "Maya, tell Connie what you've been doing with your online business." The pause before online business was barely a half second. Long enough. Sarah turned to me. She was wearing a camel blazer, her dark hair blown out perfectly, and she had the expression of someone about to be very generous. "Yes, Maya," she said. "Tell us. What's the latest with the little venture?" "It's going well," I said. "She does digital consulting," my father explained to Connie, as if translating from a language she didn't speak. "Websites. That sort of thing." "It's not really consulting," I started. "Whatever it is," Sarah said with a small laugh, gesturing broadly toward her husband, "Marcus and I have been a bit busy building something real." She said it the way people say things they believe are jokes. "Your little online thing, I mean, it's great that you enjoy it. But we're in a different league now, honestly." Marcus chuckled. "She's been saying that for 5 years." Dad smirked into his wine glass. "Playing pretend entrepreneur." Aunt Connie looked at me with something that was almost sympathy but landed closer to pity. I nodded quietly. "Understood," I said. I took another bite of roast. The table moved on. What none of them knew, what I had spent 5 years making sure none of them would know, was that Meridian Solutions, Sarah's defining B2B platform of the decade, had been kept alive by my money. Not some of my money. Most of it. When Sarah and Marcus founded Meridian in 2019, they had a good product and almost no capital. Marcus's father had put in $400,000. Enough for 6 months. Sarah had pitched 17 venture firms and gotten 17 polite rejections. The product was promising, but the market timing was uncertain, and without a lead investor they were going to run out of runway before they ever found out if the idea was real. I found out about the cash crisis the way I found out about most things in my family. Not because someone told me, but because I overheard a phone call I wasn't meant to hear. It was Thanksgiving, and Sarah had stepped into the hallway to call their accountant, and I had walked past at exactly the wrong moment. "If we don't close around in the next 60 days, we're done. Marcus doesn't know how bad it is." I went home that night and spent 4 hours reviewing everything I could find about Meridian. Their filings, their product, their market position. Then I called my investment manager, Daniel Osei, at 7 a.m. the next morning. "I want to take a position," I told him. Quietly. How quietly? They can never know it's me. That condition mattered more than anything else. I had reasons for it that had nothing to do with ego and everything to do with what I knew about my family. If Sarah discovered I was her investor, the dynamic would shift immediately, not in a good direction. She would feel indebted, then resentful of feeling indebted, then competitive, then dismissive in a way designed to neutralize the discomfort. I had watched her manage feelings of obligation my entire life. It never ended well for the person she owed. So I structured the investment through a vehicle called Harlow Capital Partners, a private fund managed by Daniel with no public connection to my name. Harlow Capital Partners led a $12 million seed round for Meridian Solutions in January 2020, positioned as an institutional investor with a focus on enterprise software. Sarah sent a company-wide email celebrating the close of their seed round. She mentioned Harlow Capital in the 3rd paragraph. I read it at my kitchen table and said nothing to anyone. Here is what I had been doing for 5 years while my family described it as a little online thing. At 26, I had left a product management role at a mid-size software firm and started building a data infrastructure company called Withdrew. The idea was straightforward but technically difficult. A middleware platform that allowed enterprise companies to standardize how their internal systems communicated with each other. Unglamorous work. The kind of product no one talks about at family dinners because it's hard to explain without 15 minutes of context. I spent the first year working 14-hour days out of a studio apartment in Culver City, living on savings, building the core product with 2 engineers I had met through a graduate program. I had no co-founder, no advisor with a famous name, no connections that opened doors automatically. What I had was a product that worked and the patience to find the 12 customers who would care about that. By the end of year 2, Withdrew had $4.2 million in annual recurring revenue and a waiting list of enterprise clients. I brought in Daniel Osei, a former investment banker I had met at a conference, to help me think about capitalization strategy. Daniel was meticulous, methodical, and had the useful quality of never being impressed by things that didn't deserve it. You could raise a Series A right now, he told me at our first real meeting. Probably at a 40 to 60 million valuation. I'd rather not, I said. Why not? Because the moment I take institutional money, I start running someone else's company. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Then what do you want to do with the revenue? Not because I plan to use them. I kept them because I am the kind of person who keeps records, and because some quiet part of me understood even then that clarity was the only protection I had. The engagement dinner for my cousin B was held at my Aunt Rosemary's house in Cleveland on a Saturday evening in late October. 42 people. My aunt's long dining room table extended into the living room with rented folding tables at the end. There was jollof rice and fried plantains and a supermarket sheet cake with B and Marcus written in pink frosting. I drove 3 hours to be there. I brought a gift. I wore a blue dress I'd bought for the occasion and spent 20 minutes trying to do something with my hair. The trouble started, as trouble in my family usually does, with a compliment directed at someone else. My Aunt Gloria, my father's older sister visiting from Toronto, was asking B about the wedding budget, and B said Marcus's parents were contributing significantly, and Gloria said what a blessing it was to have family who shows up financially, and then she looked at my father and my father looked at Daniel, and something passed between them that I had seen 100 times and always hated, the silent agreement to perform a grievance. Some of us, my father said to no one in particular and everyone at the table, raised children who understand what family means. And some of us raised children who only understand themselves. The table went quiet in the specific way that means everyone understood the reference and no one wanted to be the one to name it. Gerald, my mother said, which was not a protest, just a speed bump. I'm serious, he said. Daniel calls every week. Daniel is here for family events. Daniel shows up. He picked up his fork. Some people send a text and consider themselves done. I was sitting at the far end of the folding table extension. I had my wine glass in my hand. I set it down very carefully on the tablecloth. I drove 3 hours, I said. Geography, my father said like it was a punchline, and 3 of my uncles laughed and my cousin Jerome nodded and my mother looked at her plate. Lydia, sitting across from me, mouthed ignore it, which is the advice she has given me at every family gathering for the last 15 years and which has never once helped. She never helps, Daniel said, not cruelly, almost casually, the way you state something that's simply understood. It's just how she is. I looked at my brother. I had wired him $14,000 18 months ago. He had described me to our father as a friend. You're right, I said. It's just how I am. And I excused myself, said goodbye to B and Marcus, kissed my Aunt Rosemary on the cheek and drove back to Chicago. My father's text arrived 4 days later at 11:47 p.m. I still don't know what specifically triggered it, whether it was something Daniel said or Lydia, or whether he had simply been sitting with his anger for 4 days and it had finally fermented into something he needed to send. The message was short and surgical. I disown you. You are no longer my daughter. Talk to my lawyer. I typed OK, put the phone face down and tried to sleep. At 2 a.m. I gave up on sleep and opened my laptop instead. I sat at my kitchen island in the dark with the blue light of the screen on my face, and I looked at the spreadsheet I had kept for 6 years, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Something quieter and sadder than either of those. The the specific grief of realizing that the version of this family you'd been protecting had only ever existed in your own accounting. I cried for about 20 minutes. Not dramatically. Just quietly, in my kitchen, alone, the way you cry when you've finally admitted something to yourself that you already knew. Then I closed the spreadsheet, opened my banking app, and began scheduling the withdrawals. I want to be precise about what happened next because I think precision matters when people assume that what I did was impulsive or vindictive. It was neither. I did not cancel anything retroactively. I did not call the mortgage company and report fraud or demand refunds. I simply discontinued the forward-looking payments, the $1,800 monthly mortgage contribution, the $380 utility arrangement, the insurance coverage, effective the 1st of December, 30 days out. I gave 30 days notice the way you give notice on a lease because I believe in clean endings. I also called my attorney, a woman named Priya Subramaniam who had done my estate planning and whom I trusted completely, and told her I anticipated my father might contact a lawyer and that I wanted documentation of everything in order before that happened. Priya did not express surprise. Priya had heard enough of my family history over 3 years of professional relationship that very little surprised her. She said, "Send me the spreadsheet, every confirmation number and any communications you have in writing." I sent them that night. Then I called Marcus Chin, my closest friend from graduate school who now worked in forensic accounting, because I had kept him vaguely informed of my family situation for years and because I suspected I might need someone who could look at a set of documents and explain them calmly to people who would not want to hear what they said. Marcus said, "I've been waiting for this call. Tell me what you need." What I needed, it turned out, was for someone to sit with me for a few days in the awareness that I had just made an irrevocable decision and that the consequences were coming and that I was genuinely sad about it. Marcus flew in from New York on Thursday. We made dinner at my apartment and watched 2 movies and didn't talk about my family at all, and that was exactly what I needed. The first consequence came on Thursday morning. My mother called at 8:17 a.m. I was already at my desk, coffee in hand, reviewing a client portfolio rebalancing. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 43 seconds long. I know because I timed it before I played it. Her voice had the specific register it takes on when she is trying very hard to sound calm. "Nadia, it's Mom. There's something wrong with the mortgage account. The bank called your father and they said the automated payment didn't process for December and there might be some kind of issue. I don't know if you know anything about this or if there's a mistake somewhere, but we need to sort it out. Please call me back." I played it twice. Then I forwarded it to Priya. My father called 40 minutes later. I let that go to voicemail too. His voicemail was 11 seconds. "Call your mother." I called my mother back on Friday morning. Not because I owed her an immediate response, but because I thought clarity was kinder than prolonged confusion, and because I had learned in 32 years that my mother responded better to information than to silence. "Mom," I said, "the mortgage payment didn't process because I canceled it. I've been making that payment for 6 years. I also canceled the utility arrangement and the insurance. I gave 30 days notice. Everything ends December 1st. Silence on the line for what felt like a full minute. "What are you talking about?" she said. "You've been making our mortgage payment?" "Since 2018, I said. $1,800 a month credited to your principal. I also covered utilities at $380 a month and your car insurance since the accord." "That's not," she started. "We would have known. I set it up through a third-party servicer," I said. "There was no reason for you to know it was me." "Nadia." Her voice had shifted into something I couldn't quite name. Not anger. Not quite grief. Something between them. "Why would you do that without telling us?" I thought about how to answer that. I had thought about how to answer that for 6 years in some form or another. "Because you needed it," I said. "And because I knew if you knew it was me, it would become something else. A negotiation. An expectation. A reason to ask for more. I didn't want it to be any of those things. I just wanted to help. And now you're taking it away." "Dad disowned me," I said. "Talk to my lawyer." I heard her breath catch. "He didn't mean." "Mom," I said. "He meant it enough to send it in writing at midnight." I took him at his word. "I think that's fair." She started crying then. Not the quiet kind, the kind that fills a phone line. I sat with it for a moment. It was not easy to sit with. I want to be honest about that. It was not a triumphant sound. It was the sound of someone whose house of cards had just registered the first tremor, and she was only beginning to understand how many cards there were. "What are we supposed to do?" she said. "I don't know," I said. "But that's a question for Dad and his lawyer." That's what he told me. I ended the call. I sat at my desk for a long time afterward, not working, just sitting. Marcus was still at my apartment that evening. He made pasta. I sat at the kitchen island and told him how the call had gone, and he listened without interrupting, and when I was finished he said, "How do you feel?" "Like I did the right thing," I said. "And like that doesn't feel the way I thought it would." He nodded. "It rarely does." What I had imagined in the abstract was something clarifying. Something that would feel like setting down a weight. What it actually felt like was closer to surgery. The necessary kind, the kind where the procedure goes exactly as planned and you still wake up from the anesthesia feeling like something has been removed from your body. My father had not called again. I expected that. He was a man who experienced being wrong as an attack on his fundamental self-conception, and the information that had just reached him, that the daughter he had publicly called selfish had been quietly subsidizing his mortgage for 6 years, was not information he had any framework to receive gracefully. What happened instead over the next week came to me in fragments. Priya called on Monday. My father had contacted a lawyer as threatened. The lawyer, once briefed on the actual financial history, had apparently suggested my father reconsider his position. There was no legal claim. The payments had been voluntary, made from my own accounts, documented meticulously, and discontinued with 30 days' notice. There was nothing to litigate. My Aunt Rosemary called on Tuesday, not my father's sister Gloria, but my mother's sister, who had always been the quieter and more perceptive of the two. She said she had heard some things and wanted to make sure I was all right. I told her I was fine. She said, "I always knew you were the one holding things together even when they didn't." I thanked her and got off the phone before I cried because I had decided I was done crying about this and I had more or less kept to that. Daniel called on Wednesday, which I had not expected. He didn't apologize exactly. What he said was, "I didn't know it was you. The money in 2022. I didn't know that was you." "I know," I said. "I wouldn't have," he stopped. Started again. "I wouldn't have said what I said at the dinner if I'd known." "I know that too," I said. "And I did. My brother wasn't cruel. He was just careless, the way people are careless when they've never had to account carefully for anything. But Daniel, I need you to hear something. I'm not angry at you specifically. I'm just done carrying things alone and having it counted against me." He was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said finally. "Okay." It was not a transformation. It was not a resolution. It was a small true thing said plainly, which is about the most you can hope for from a Wednesday phone call with your brother. The full accounting of what my father did and did not know arrived in stages, the way these things always do. What he had known, that the mortgage was current, that the bills were paid. He had attributed this to his own careful management, to my mother's budgeting, to the natural steadying of their finances as his salary plateaued and their expenses theoretically leveled off. He had not asked questions he didn't want answered. This, I understood, was not stupidity. It was a practiced and deliberate form of not knowing, the kind that preserves a self-image at the cost of accuracy. What he had not known, that I existed as the structural support beneath the floor he was standing on. When Priya met with their family attorney in December, a meeting my father did not attend, sending only his lawyer in a gesture of what I recognized as wounded pride, she presented the complete documentation. 6 years of payment records. The third-party servicer agreements. Every wire transfer, every confirmation number, every insurance renewal. $230,400 in total. Their attorney called Priya afterward and said, professionally and carefully, that his client had been surprised by the scope of the documentation. "I imagine he was," Priya said. The lawyer added that his client wished to communicate that he was reconsidering certain statements made in a text message in November. "My client received those statements in writing," Priya said. She responded in writing. "The record is clear." Their attorney thanked her and ended the call. My father called me himself on a Sunday evening in January, 10 weeks after the text. I answered. He was quiet for a moment after I said hello. The silence of someone who has rehearsed something and is now deciding whether to say it or something different. "I didn't know," he said finally. "About the money. I didn't know it was you." "I know," I said. "That doesn't," he stopped. "Tried again. It doesn't change what I said." "I know that. I'm saying it anyway." I waited. "I was wrong," he said. The words came out like something being set down from a height. carefully with visible effort. About the dinner. About the text. I was wrong. My father had said he was wrong to me exactly twice in my life prior to this moment. Once when I was 9 and he accused me of breaking a lamp Daniel had broken. Once when I was 17 and he told me I would never get into the schools I was applying to. This was the third time. I said. He repeated. And then after a pause, is there a way forward? I thought about that question for a long time before I answered. I thought about the spreadsheet. About the 2 a.m. in my kitchen. About my mother's voice on the phone saying what are we supposed to do in the tone of someone who had never had to ask that question and was only now discovering it was a question that could be asked. I don't know yet, I said honestly. I need some time. He said. I understand. We talked for 4 more minutes about nothing important. The weather in Cleveland, a documentary he'd watched, and then we said goodbye. I don't know what we are to each other now. I don't know if the payments resume in some form, in some different arrangement with different terms and different transparency. I don't know if the family dinners ever feel like something I want to drive 3 hours toward again. What I know is that for 6 years I held something up in secret, and the secret cost me more than the money ever did. Cost me the ability to be known. It cost me the chance to be thanked or argued with or negotiated with or refused. To be in a real relationship with my own family rather than a hidden one, propping up a fiction from underneath. My therapist, I started seeing her in January, which I should have done years earlier, says that the hidden support wasn't just generosity. It was also control. A way of ensuring I remained necessary without ever having to risk being chosen. I'm still thinking about whether that's true. I think it might be partially true, which is worse than if it were either fully true or fully false. I still have the spreadsheet. I have not deleted it. I don't know what I'm keeping it for now that there's nothing left to document. But I keep it. My life is not the family story. I want to say that clearly because it's easy in a story like this for everything else to collapse into the drama at the center of it. My life is the work. The client portfolios I care about more than I probably should. The satisfaction of a rebalancing that comes in exactly right. The morning I sat in a board meeting and recommended a position that 3 senior partners thought was too aggressive, and turned out to be the best performing move in that quarter's strategy. My colleague James sends me a coffee mug every time I'm right about something he doubted. I have 6 of them. My life is Marcus texting me book recommendations at 11 p.m. and the argument we had for 3 weeks about whether the remains of the day is a tragedy or a love story. It is both, I maintain. Marcus maintains it is neither. We will be arguing about this when we are 80. My life is the apartment I have made exactly the way I want it. The east-facing windows, the particular blue of the rug in the living room, the shelf of plants that Marcus says I treat better than I treat most people and which I refuse to dignify with a response because he is not entirely wrong. My life is B's wedding in June, which I attended, and where I danced with my Aunt Rosemary for a full song and felt briefly like something in the family was capable of being uncomplicated. It is not a resolved life. No one's is. But it is mine, and I am learning, slowly, imperfectly, with professional help, to stop paying for things in secret and to be present for the cost of whatever comes next. My father's mortgage is 32 days past due as of January. I know because Priya told me. I don't know what they'll do. I don't know if Daniel will step in or if there are assets I'm not aware of, or if they will finally have the conversation about their finances they have not had in 40 years of marriage. That is not my problem to solve. It took me a very long time to be able to say that without feeling like a traitor. The $3,200 a month I'm no longer sending is sitting in an account I opened in November. I don't know what it's for yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. Maybe I'll finally take the trip to Portugal I've been planning for 3 years and never scheduled because there was always something else that needed the money more. Portugal has excellent wine. I have researched this thoroughly. I am trying to learn to buy things for myself. It is harder than it sounds, for someone who spent 6 years paying for things she wasn't allowed to take credit for. But I'm working on it. That's what I have right now. I'm working on it.